Everybody, it's great to be here, and as somebody who has come up through the EMS system and been a part of this community for a very long time, it's nice to be home. It's nice to be with all of you talking about a story of something that happened to me that I think personalizes why it's so important for us to have a first responder network that can provide prioritized communications for public safety. And so I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. I want to take you to an event that happened to me about 18 months ago. I was going through the death of my father-in-law, and he had cancer and spent about a year in cancer treatment. And my wife and I were in Illinois, and he was in hospice care, and we knew that he was likely to pass away over the Christmas holidays. And as we worked through that, the tough times, those last days, all of you have seen it. All of you have held the hand of someone as they go through this. And most importantly, you've seen their very last moments. He was able to die with dignity. He was able to get through that event, and it's always hard. And this happened on January 2nd of 2015. My wife and I, after that long week, returned back to the Washington, D.C. area where I work now, and we were exhausted. It was the weekend. Barely had time to recover before the work week was going to start again, and I'd been out of the office for a little bit of time to work through this. And I had to go to the Consumer Electronics Show, somewhere where technology certainly is being talked about. And for the last couple of years, I've gone there to talk about public safety technology, the Internet of Lifesaving Things, and those kinds of things that can really change the way we perform public safety services. But I have to admit, I was pretty exhausted. It's a tough time. We've all gone through that with parents and other things that are going on. And I got on my flight in Washington, D.C. at Dulles for a direct flight to Las Vegas. And unlike almost every other flight I've ever gone on, I didn't do work. I didn't jump on the internet. I didn't use Wi-Fi and get caught up on email. Instead, I got on that plane and I just went to sleep. It was actually somewhat of a relief. I spent a couple hours not thinking about a whole lot and just getting ready for the busy week ahead and the busy year ahead that we were going to have at FirstNet. When I landed, I turned on my two phones. As many of you, I have more than one smart device in my pocket. When I turned on those devices, I had that terrible sinking feeling. And what happened was I just started having messages pop up, text messages, voice messages, and it was not normal. Anybody who's been through this, when you turn back on your device and something bad has happened, you know something bad has happened. And I had that sinking feeling. And the sinking feeling was obviously that something had gone wrong. So I look at the names of the people who had called, and it was my sister. And I love my sister to death, but it's not somebody I talk to every single day. And the fact that I had 4 messages in rapid fire from my sister, I knew something was wrong. I then had a message from my wife. I had a message from my chief counsel. I knew something terrible had happened, but then you have to check that message. So I listened to the messages from my sister, knowing that obviously something had happened to my family. And the first message said, "Something's wrong with Dad, call me." That's it. Hung up. A few minutes later, "I'm driving to Dad's house, but the ambulance hasn't passed me yet. This is not a good sign. Call. Where are you?" Next thing, "I've arrived at our father's home, and you got to call me quickly. Call." And then just a very negative message of, "Call when you have a minute." And I knew something obviously had happened to my father. Without even listening to the message from my wife, I just picked up the phone and called her. She's been my best friend for well over 20 years. Over 22 years ago, we got married. She was a flight nurse at Life Flight, where I was a flight paramedic. We're one of those EMS relationships that I guess occur over the years. And I knew she would give it to me straight. We have a very great relationship and friendship. And I called her and she just said, "Your dad just died." My dad was much younger than her father. I had talked to him on this day earlier in the day, and he was perfectly fine. My dad, I never, ever expected this to happen quite that way. Very young, way too young to have this happen. Just an amazing experience to go through, being on the other end of being part of that family, dealing with the net results of what we all know each and every day. So I called my sister, I called my mother after that. I'm sitting on a plane on the tarmac in Las Vegas, not exactly the best place to have this kind of a conversation. You've all been there. I asked my sister what happened. That's what we always want to know, what happened? And she said, "Your father, he ran on the treadmill every night for 45 minutes, and he went down at 6 o'clock and ran on the treadmill like he always did, but 45 minutes later, he didn't come back up." And And so my mother went down to check on him, thinking that was odd, and she went down there and he was on the floor in cardiac arrest. She did what we would want anybody to do in that situation, and she dialed 911. For somebody of her age, actually, it was good that she dialed 911 because probably the last 6 medical emergencies she's seen, she did not dial 911. So she had figured out that's a good thing to do in this case, which is a big step forward for my mother. I'm proud of her that she actually called 911. And we live or my family lived in a very rural area of Pennsylvania, the Poconos, a volunteer EMS service, terrific county paramedics that now respond. Back in the day when I was a volunteer, we didn't have the extended ALS services that they now have. And the local fire department was barely a mile away. They responded. He had obviously been down for too long already, and they couldn't resuscitate him. Nothing more they could do, nothing more the system could do in that situation. The sad part for me, though, is I know as EMTs and as paramedics and as the EMS service that we all are a part of, that we can do more, that the technology that exists today, the things that exist today that can make this outcome differently. And so I asked myself, what if? What if things were different? What if technology was used in a different way? You know, what if my father that day was wearing a smartwatch? What if that smartwatch could detect some other kind of rhythm or something that was going wrong and be able to let him know that? And what if in that situation, things happened differently? And so I kind of want to walk through a story that is the what if story. What if something different were to happen? What if that watch that happened to be on his hand when he was on the treadmill that day let him know that he was having an abnormal arrhythmia? What if he was able to tap on his smartphone to notify a number of different people that something was going wrong? What if it automatically called my sister? What if it automatically told my mother, his wife, that he was having an abnormal heart rhythm while it was occurring before it killed him? This is something that technology exists today. We're not necessarily using it in that way, but it's there. What if that also allowed him with one button to notify 911 and they were notified 20 minutes sooner than they actually were? What if that changed that continuity of care of what could have occurred that day? What if when somebody called for 911, even during that situation, but the difference was that dispatcher was able to get two-way video? You just heard Dr. Mehta talk about, having two-way video for the ability to be able to see a stroke patient and see the difference in that. But what about two-way video for what's happening at a scene? What about situational awareness for those EMS responders that are coming? What if in a location where it takes a long time to get an AED to a scene or to get a defibrillator and advanced care to a scene, we have AEDs that can be delivered by a drone, by an unmanned aerial system? What if we have the ability to get AEDs somewhere in 1 minute because they're going by air and they're not dealing with the traffic, they're not dealing with the roads, they're not dealing with the snowy weather, whatever that may happen to be? What could that do to change that actual outcome? What could it do to change the speed of care, that if a bystander was able to actually do something with that and change the outcome in that first 10 minutes after that cardiac event? What if you had two-way video and voice with the dispatcher so that they could actually see what's going on and relay that to the incoming EMTs and paramedics and what's going on in that scene? What if those changes actually occurred and had a different outcome at the end of the day because when EMTs and paramedics arrive, those shocks that have already occurred, they're able to do the advanced care that needs to happen. They're able to do the 12-lead EKG. They're able to alert the STEMI team so that when that person gets to the hospital, everybody's ready to do what they can do to have that definitive intervention that will change a life. And what happens when that patient gets to the emergency room and goes straight to the cath lab and that patient has a dramatically different outcome? To me, this is the world that we live in today. We've changed cardiac care dramatically. We haven't necessarily changed it quite as much in rural America, but there's no reason why we can't, especially with technology today. At the same point, we in public safety have not really always taken advantage of technology quite at the same rate as many others in the community because we haven't had a dedicated network. We haven't had priority. We haven't had preemption. Well, I have to admit, the main reason why I came back to public service was to make sure that we have a network that is going to be able to provide the kinds of public safety applications, the kinds of life-saving applications that can make a difference. You heard about just a few earlier today, but I believe that the people in this room, I believe that each and every one of you are going to be part of that innovation that changes the way that we provide emergency medical care in the field, not just in the United States, but around the world. I believe we can be the innovators that actually drive the way that we share information and get it in the hands of those that need it most. And that's the people in the field. That's all of you who are out taking care of patients each and every day, who are part of really innovating in what needs to happen, and also making sure that technology is not a burden. Technology should make your life easier as an EMT or a paramedic. It should make the job of taking care of patients faster and more efficient, and it should allow you to free up your hands. It should allow you not to hold the cell phone in your hands and give a report to an emergency room. We're in 2016. Why don't you have microphones and capabilities that are built in and have ability for all of your monitoring equipment to send data when and how you want with voice commands so that you're not spending your time with your hands on a phone when they can be on a patient? These are the kinds of things that I think will really change and revolutionize the way that all of you provide emergency medical services across this country. I'm really excited to see this ongoing innovation and what happens with different guides. You saw some good examples today from Dr. Mehta on what can happen when folks at the hospital really know what's coming in, that they have the data quick and early, and most importantly, when we recognize some of the critical care patients that we come across. There are many things today that exist in the hospital community and that exist in the pre-hospital community, but are not necessarily connected to the way that we do our business. We're not getting the economies of scale from big cities being able to be shared with small communities when it comes to technology. One of the things we need to do is have a default open way to communicate and to share technology across the United States, and for that matter, across the world. We need to have the ability to take technologies that can work in a hospital setting and make sure that they're shared with folks in the pre-hospital community and are made inexpensive and cost-effective and allow us to really make that change. And to me, that's where that Internet of Lifesaving Things really comes in. If here in New Orleans, where you have been absolute leaders in the pre-hospital community, you come up with amazing ideas for an application, a way that the EMS community could share information with police officers, firefighters, emergency rooms, ways that better life-saving care can be delivered. If you can share that with the other 60,000 public safety agencies just in the United States, think of the difference that we can make when we're creating that application. We're taking that life-saving advance and we're sharing it on a network that will allow many others to benefit from that same capability. Doesn't matter how small your agency is, doesn't matter how much money you invest in technology. If you have access to that same kind of innovative software, that same kind of innovation that's going to occur, I really believe that we can change the world of EMS care in the United States, and we can do it now. I think as we provide a network, as we provide the ability to have priority, preemption, encryption, great security on that network, and have the ability to send a large amount of information, having the ability to send video, HD video, having the ability to send data back and forth between dispatch centers and public safety in the field, and most importantly, between public safety and other first responders in the field, we're going to change the way that we do our roles for the better. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is the innovation is going to come from each and every one of you. I want to do a little survey here in the room. How many of you today have a smartphone on you, in your pocket, in your hand? You're texting at this exact moment, majority of you. How many of you have at least 2 smart devices on you right now? Smartwatches, smartphones, more than half the room seems to be raising their hand. How many of you would be interested if we could come forward as a first responder network and provide you a smartphone, a dongle, a wireless card for your computer that would allow you to have the ability to have priority and preemption on a network with a public safety applications ecosystem at the same price or better than what you pay for service today? How many of you would want that in this room? All right, I think that it shows that there is a need, it shows that there is a demand, it shows that we need to make this happen. And I think what's important about that is let's talk about priority and preemption. I think one of the reasons why we haven't fully leveraged technology is that when networks get congested and big events happen, sometimes you can't get through. Sometimes the quality of that call is not good enough or you get dropped. Sometimes you are not able to send that video that you want to send or those pictures that you want to send from the scene to where it needs to go. So one of the important things for the first responder network, FirstNet, that we plan to do is we'll have priority and preemption on this network across the country. We will allow access to every single police, fire, and EMS agency in the country. It's the same spectrum, it's the same network, it'll have the same priority and preemption capabilities for all of you. And so you're not fighting and competing with commercial traffic to be able to get a signal. You're not fighting to be able to have that signal go through at the speeds that you need it to go through. And that you'll be able to leverage the same kinds of technology and the same kinds of technology that are on their smartphone that every 16-year-old child uses today, but in a way that will save lives. And I think having that ability to save lives with technology and not just use technology to improve what we do 10% better, but to use technology to improve what we do 10 times better. And I think we need to challenge ourselves to think a bit more outside the box. I think that all of you here in this room know more about what would make your life easier or better as a paramedic, as an EMT intermediate, and what you do to be able to change the lives of the people in your community, to be able to change the way that you all work together and share information. My default, I've worked on public safety for a number of big events, a number of Olympic Games from a public safety perspective. And the one thing that always seems to work is when we share. When we share information, when we train together, when we work together. It doesn't matter if it's 10 agencies, 20 agencies, 100 agencies. I've seen it happen in the US and I've seen it happen abroad. We work best as public safety when we have a default that is open, when we have the default that we share information with each other so that we all have the information we need. There will be great opportunities to crunch that data and make it useful and to be able to share that with each other, but I guarantee you our technology community will do that with us. I guarantee you the technology community will embrace emergency medical services, not just because it's a market, but because the mission matters. If you think about it, I've gone out to talk to developers. If they have the difference between creating the next video game or creating the next application, because paramedics and EMTs in this country are demanding it because it will save lives, they're going to choose to save lives. They're going to choose to make that difference in their community and in this country. But that's only going to come from each and every one of you. Over the next year, we're going to be bringing plans to all the 50 states across this country, the 5 territories and the District of Columbia, for a state plan for the FirstNet network in that state. Get involved. Learn more about it. Learn what it can do for you. Learn what pulling together this Internet of Things can do for you so that we can move from the era of 30, 40 years ago when we thought we were sending information from the field to hospitals, but what we really can do today. And we know that we've come a long way since emergency. We know that the technology that exists today can be really game-changing for the future. But I think it's up to each and every one of us. Let's find ways to change and leverage the technology we have to be more effective at saving lives, to be more efficient in the use of our resources, but most importantly, to do it in a way that will make a difference in our communities at home and will make a difference for each and every one of our agencies. So it's personal to me. I hope it's personal to each and every one of you. We have the power in our pocket to really innovate and change the world of emergency medical services, not in the next 10 years, in the next year or two. We have the world that we can leverage in what's going on today across the entire world when it comes to emergency medical care, and to be able to really change what can be done in the field, which will change what can be done in the hospital, which will change the outcomes for patients that we see each and every day. So let's work together to do that. Let's make a difference, and let's leverage technology as part of that. Thank you.